Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I want to talk about something really unique and special, and that is a branching of humanity. I think we're reaching a point. Dungeons and Dragons is so spectacular that it is triggering, not triggering. It is a harbinger of a split in humanity. I think at this point, right now in 2023, we live with three types of humans. We live with humans, and those are people who are lost. We'll get there. Who are lost and who do not have Dungeons and Dragons. Okay. They're just regular humans. And then there are hyperhumans, and these are human beings who have experienced, encountered, and engaged fully with Dungeons and Dragons. And then there are the saved. And that's me. I'm an evangelical Christian. I'm saved. I'm gonna go to heaven. I'm not like you. I'm gonna have eternity, right? Like I'm not gonna have one life. I will live eternally in heaven with God. There'll be no second death for me, right? Like, I will, and because of Jesus Christ, I will live beyond humanity. I will live beyond this human shell, right? Now let's talk. So humans are people who are not saved, are not going to, their afterlife is going to be so bad it won't, no one would want it, right? It's not going to be a glorious eternity. It's going to be an eternity of wrath and horror, right? And so they're just humans, right? And they don't have an eternal life. They have an eternal life that no one would want. They have a worthless eternal life. They have a worthless, that's the best way to say it. They have a worthless eternal life, and they don't have Dungeons and Dragons. Now, Scott, why would it matter if a regular human has Dungeons and Dragons? We're going to get there. Hang on with me. And then there are hyperhumans, and these are the humans that Gary Gygax has set into place, right? And I'm actually not a hyperhuman. I'm an evangelical Christian. It trumps that. It's the highest form of humanity. It's humans who will live in God in a perfect form forever, right? But there's this between state. There's this between state, and I want to talk about them. I want to talk about the hyperhumans who do not have Christ, will not be perfected, will not have this third form of uber humanity, right? Um, but they have this mid humanity, and they're more than human. Hyperhumans, in my opinion, made by Gary Gygax, are more than human. Let me get you all the way there. All right, so I've been haunted recently, right? I don't take in stories the way the rest of the world does. Every story I take in is being taken in so that I can be a better dungeon master. I no longer look at I'm gonna look at this movie and have some fun. Whatever. Yep. Next. Thank you. Human, not hyperhuman, not saved human. Right? Like, why am I talking to you? Like, like it's just, like it's just a human, right? Like, I intake stories to build worlds, right? And so that I can be a better world builder, so that I could turn on a dime and present 1,000 different non-player characters. So I am a world builder, and it fundamentally changes the way I process art, right? And the way you process art. You're not a regular human. If you're on this channel and you're listening to me, you're not human. You're either hyperhuman or you're saved. You're a saved human, right? Like, yeah, like, yes. So let's get okay. So I watched Leave the World Behind, and man, oh man, Leave the World Behind. It haunts me. That film haunts me. It was truly brilliant, right? And there was a character in it, Rose, who was the child of this privileged family, this lean-in Clintonian feminist, and a weak media professor, right? And they had a son and a daughter, and the daughter was absolutely fascinating. And she was watching through Friends, and she cared about Friends more than anything she cared about in her life. The show Friends, right? And in the show and in the movie Left Behind, she has seen all of the Friends episodes except the last one, which is literally called The Last One, right? And she desperately wants to see it, and the world is ending, and she says to her brother, "I need to see this." And he's like, "Why?" And she says, "Because for the friends, I care about them." And he's like, "You shouldn't," right? And in that, there's this powerful, consideration of, we're past that, right? We spend huge amounts of time with people who are created, right? And the reality is, for this little girl, Chandler Bing, and Chandler Bing and Monica and Rachel and Joey were way more important than her friends, right? And the movie was also kind of like, how dare you question her? How dare you question her? And her brother does. He's like, you shouldn't care about them, right? And the movie's like, you could go kick rocks, right? And and they're like, hey, we choose our lives now, right? If we want to choose to care about somebody else that's been created, a character that's been created, more than the people in our lives, that's our choice, right? And literally, Rose in the film she's like saying, no one's listening to me, right? And there's another character in the film that comes and talks about the movie the show Friends, and in the movie, and she says, Friends is a show that makes us nostalgic for a world that never was. Now, what really blew my mind, right, when I was thinking about this, when I was like kind of processing all this, and I get to the point where I'm understanding this little girl, and I realized she's human, right? The lowest in the hierarchy, because she lives in a world that was never made for her, but given to her, right? They did not make friends for her. It literally wasn't even her generation, right? It wasn't even intended for her generation, but her generation loves it, Gen Z, right? And I was like, and I was thinking, and I was like, she's human because she lives in a world that was never made for her, but was given to her, right? And then I realized, what do Dungeons and Dragons players do? What do dungeon masters do? What do dungeon performers, people who play player characters at a Dungeons and Dragons play table, right? Let's get there. What do they do, right? I can tell you now what they do, okay? Dungeons and Dragons dungeon masters and dungeon performers, we live in a world we made that we took. Humans live in worlds that were never made for them, that were given to them. There's no intention for them. There's no effort on their part. Worlds that were never made for them, that were given to them. But Dungeons and Dragons performers, dungeon performers, and dungeon masters live in worlds they intentionally made, that they took. This is mine, right? I created it. I possess it. It is mine, and I will do with it that I control. Right? Like that I have taken. I have taken control. Dungeon performers take control of worlds they built on their own, right? And you're like, well, wait a second, Scott. What if they run in Forgotten Realms? Yeah, you're right. It's not their world for 30 seconds, right? It's not their world until one of them makes one decision that changes that world, and then it's theirs. And Ed Greenwood can go kick rocks. He was needed to get it set up, but he's needed no longer, right? This is a world they have made with decision by decision, character by character, event by event, branch by branch. I'm talking time branch, Loki time branch, right? So humans live in worlds that were never made for them. There's nothing personal about Friends. It wasn't made for Rose, right? It was made for a collective mass, right? It's pablum, right? So these are worlds that were never made for them, that were given to them, just handed to them, right? Live in this world, and they do. Hyperhumans, Dungeons and Dragons performers, dungeon masters, live in worlds that they made for themselves, that they forged for themselves, and that they take control of. They take it. It's not given to them. They take it, right? And they take complete control of it. And they take responsibility for it. That's the key. There's no spoon feeding. They are hunting their own food, their intellectual food, their emotional food, even their spiritual food. right? Hyperhuman, more than human, right? And last, me, right? I was human until I was 15, and I was saved by Jesus Christ. I became a saved human. And then I spent time emulating a hyperhuman. And I have incredible sympathy for hyperhumans. I'm not a hyperhuman. I'm a saved human. I'm higher on the hierarchy, right? I literally am living a blessed life right now, and I'm going to have an eternal perfect life, right? Now, which of those is best, right? It's worse to be human. It is by far worse to be human. It is better to be hyperhuman, but it is best to be saved human. You know how to do that? Admit you're a sinner, that you have no way to save you, and ask Jesus Christ to give you his salvation, which he bought for you on the cross, and believe that his perfect life and his perfect death is enough to save you. And then you will be saved human, and you can move from hyperhuman to saved human. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic, please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.